begin with, wishing all of you a very happy नवरात्रा because आज का वीडियो मैं नवरात्रि के पहले दिन में बना रही हूँ. So to begin with, I'm making this video after a gap of around 2 weeks. In fact, इसका एक particular reason है which I'll share and then I'll move to today's topic. So what happened is, when in the last series of mine, when I started talking about emotional intelligence, उस टाइम मुझे काफ़ी पर्सनल मैसेजेस आए थे कि before we get into emotional intelligence, no doubt कि it is talked about a lot, but पहले a lot of people don't understand what emotions are. In fact, ये पहली बार सुनने में बहुत funny लगेगा कि people don't understand emotions, because जब हम बोलते हैं emotions तो nobody is there who can say that we don't understand. Each one of us understand what emotions are. But अगर मैं आपको बोलूँ कि can you define emotions or can you explain what emotions are, believe me ये बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा, because emotions जितना easy बोलना और सुनना लगता है, उसको समझना उतना ही मुश्किल है. So we are going to start by defining what emotions are. People are studying emotions since time immemorial. In fact, the person who is known as the father of emotions is Paul Ekman, and he is the person who studied about emotions and facial expressions. We are going to talk about him because he has been an American psychologist and has done a lot of work on emotions, facial expressions, in fact, cross-cultural emotions, and how do people express their emotions in different cultures. He has done extensive study. We are going to talk about him in coming videos. So he is known as father of emotions. In fact, Charles Darwin, who is known as, his work is known in other fields more, has also worked on emotions. In fact, he has worked on emotions of human beings and animals, species, and he has found that there are few similarities as far as emotions of human beings and animals is concerned. So there are many people who have worked on emotions. In fact, here I'll just like to begin with the work of Plato and Aristotle, who has also worked on emotions. In the time of Plato and Aristotle, also emotions were talked about. In fact, they believe that, in fact, this whole lot then believe that emotions are very subjective experience, and these subjective experience is different from the sensory experience. इसका मतलब ये है कि each individual, whatever they feel is very different from whatever they see. So seeing or hearing is different from what they feel. So this was the concept of Plato, Aristotle. But later on in 18th century, there was another group of scientists which were led by William James and Carl Lang. In fact, the theory was known as James-Lange Theory, and they said that the subjective experience and the sensory experience are not separate, so there is no difference. James-Lange Theory said very clearly that whatever we see, right, that has got an effect on our physiology, and the physiology leads to emotions. So if I want to explain you this very simply with the help of an example, इसका मतलब ये है कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमारे सामने अगर कोई शेर आ गया, राइट, हम उसको देखेंगे. शेर को देखने की वजह से हमारी बॉडी में ना चेंजेस आते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल हार्ट बीट तेज हो जाएगी, एंड देन प्रोबेबली हो सकता है हम स्वेट करने लगे, घबराने लगे, बॉडी शिवर करने लगे. सो इसका सिंपली ये मतलब है कि हमने देखा, हमारी बॉडी में चेंजेस आई, और उस चेंजेस की वजह से हमें एक इमोशन एक्सपीरियंस हुआ, और वो इमोशन था फियर. सो जेम्स लैंग थ्योरी सेड दैट the whatever we see, right, that is sensory, has got an effect on our physiology, and this physiology leads to an emotion. So all this is linked, right? In contrast to what earlier theorists said that जो हम देखते हैं उससे हमारी बॉडी में जो चेंजेस आते हैं उसका कोई रिलेशन नहीं है. So this was in contrast to the earlier theory. So when this theory came up, there was another theory which was just the opposite of the present theory, and this theory was given by Walter Cannon and Philip Bard. And this theory came to known as Cannon-Bard theory. And in this theory, what was said that these the physiological changes, that is the bodily changes and the emotions, it's not always that the physiological changes lead to an emotion. मीनिंग देयर बाय कि जैसे लास्ट एग्जांपल हमने बोला था कि हमें स्वेटिंग आने लगी, हमारा हार्ट बीट तेज होने लगा, एंड दैट कैन लीड टू एन इमोशन लाइक फियर. दिस थ्योरी सेड दैट नहीं, फिजियोलॉजिकल चेंजेस डिफरेंट हैं और आपका इमोशन डिफरेंट है. दे सेड दैट कि हो सकता है कि हमारी हार्ट बीट तेज होना, स्वेटिंग होना इज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ नॉट द फियर बट of other reasons. So we cannot always relate the physiological changes with the emotions. हो सकता है कि हमारी हार्ट बीट भागने की वजह से तेज हुई हो और किसी एक्साइटमेंट की वजह से तेज हुई हो. So these physiological changes cannot always be linked with one emotion as such. So this is what was stated by Walter Cannon and Philip Bard. So this was another concept which came on as far as emotion is concerned. So these have been few of the theories and understanding of emotions till date. But what is the understanding of emotions in the present context is what we are going to discuss. So in the present context, most of the psychologists believe that emotions are a result of three components. And these three components are, the very first is subjective experience, the second is physiological changes, and the third is the behavior. So when all these things interact, we tend to arrive at one emotions. And let me tell you, when I say all these three interacting and coming to one emotion, if each and every component of these change, the emotions at the end of the day change. Now what does it mean? For example, when I said the very first component is subjective experience. So subjective experience simply means that what is my personal experience, and this personal experience is different for different individual. That's the reason we have said that this is subjective, because मेरा experience different होगा, आपका experience different होगा. When I say subjective experience, इसका simply मतलब ये है कि मेरा experience related to one animal or incident is different from the experience which you may have. For example, I may be afraid of lion, right? Like most of us, but there may be people who are, trainers of lion, or they work in zoo. They may not be afraid of lions for that matter. So subjective experience is an experience which is different for me and for you. So these experience ultimately decides कि whether we are going to have a fearful emotion or not. अगर मेरा subjective experience वैसा है तो मेरा fear होगा, किसी और का नहीं है तो उसका नहीं होगा. So the very first is subjective experience. Second is bodily changes. If if my experience with seeing a lion is not good, my bodily physiology is going to change, right? For example, if I'm afraid, I'll start sweating, I'll start, my heart will start beating aloud, I'll start shivering. So this is the physiology which I get because of my subjective experience. And having said that, the third is the behavior. So behavior means if I'm fearful, I'll just try to run away, right? And if somebody is not, they will stay calm and composed in such situation also. Very clearly, if I say the three components of emotions, they interact and produce a particular emotion. So as I said that the subjective experience, then the physiology and the behavior ultimately interacting and deciding upon the emotion. So I'll take one example and show that how the emotions differ for one person, right? The context is same, and how the emotions differ for the second person, and again the context remains the same. As I said, taking up the case of lion, right? I have a subjective experience, not so good, my physiology is going to be really bad, and the behavior is going to be run off, and ultimately emotion is going to be fear. If in the second case my subjective experience is going to be friendly with line, right, my physiology is not going to be the way it was, racing hard and sweating and anxiety, and the behavior is that I'm going to be very playful with the line, right? So you can see that whatever we are seeing in front is line, but the feeling is different. One, it is fear, the second, it is friendliness. And again, these both are again emotions, but the whole cycle has changed, hence the emotion has changed in the same example for two different people. In fact, this particular example reminds me of the difference between emotions and feelings. A lot of times it happens that we tend to, interchange both of these because we believe that there is not much difference between an emotion and a feeling. But believe me, there is a major, major difference between these two terms, right? Emotions and feelings, which we are going to cover in our next video. So please stay tuned and thank you so much for watching. God bless.